Hello. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Charter Oak State College Foundation, with the support of President Klonowski, and to our wonderful panelists and guests that you'll hear from later on, it's my pleasure to introduce and to speak with you about this wonderful Shea Lecture video series that we are presenting. The overall objective of the Shea Lecture initiative is to provoke critical thinking and dialogue among students and the general community concerning critical social issues. Beyond being simply a forum for discussion, this year's forum's intent is to be a call to action. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic, the social unrest, the widening racial divide and wealth gap, the injustice that's happening in our communities among our citizens of Black and brown color. This series sought to challenge our audiences to be actively engaged in solutions. Following our three-part lecture series, President Klonowski drafted a white paper report. The goal of that white paper was really to summarize and to capture and to memorialize the thoughts and the intents of our guest speakers, but also to capture the dialogue between those in the community that participated in the series. I am most appreciative to the outstanding support that I received from my colleagues on the Charter Oak State College Foundation. Also to the wonderful leadership, to the staff at the West Hartford Chamber of Commerce. And it's from this context that we present to you the Shea Lecture series. It's more than just dialogue, but really it's about solutions, creative solutions, and I think the experts that you'll hear from will really present to you some ideas that we can help move this needle to a more inclusive and a more equal society. Thank you.
The nation is literally on fire, a fire that is tied to both an environmental catastrophe, a social and racial justice crisis, the most divisive presidential campaign in memory. Economic disparity is determined by history and economic forces. Connecticut, which last year had one of the highest per capita incomes in the country, also places 2/3 of its Black and Hispanic public school students in institutions that are effectively segregated.
Among the towns in our service area, and we service Hartford and Talon County, there are urban areas, there's suburban areas, and there's rural areas. And when we talk about food insecurity, we talk about food insecurity in each of those three different areas. There's really two different paths of solutions that we kind of are looking at in this particular industry right now. One that we have is figuring out how we help people during this particular pandemic. How do we keep emergency food distributions going during the winter months? How sustainable are they in the long term? The other piece of it, where exactly are the longer term solutions? Food insecurity is not a standalone issue. Food insecurity is often a symptom of or a correlated diagnosis with a number of other different things. And what it comes down to is poverty. Food banking in general and food banks in general and this whole industry needs to understand that food security is absolutely a major problem, but it is more of an indication of a larger problem, and that problem is poverty. How do we go about helping to link our clients, our customers with other services that they need? It's practical services like healthcare, like literacy, job training, simple things like registering to vote and answering the census.
In another area of race on the effects of race on economic disparity is in the housing market. Housing is important in so many ways to the health and well-being of citizens.
This disparity has been the result of decades of racial discrimination in real estate, lending practices, and federal housing policies. These policies and practices were intentionally structured to prevent people of color from building wealth and or to live in better neighborhoods. For us at the Department of Housing, so I'll start with a couple of things. It's a short-term goal, which is what I can influence at this point. So we are actually promoting affordable housing in communities that have a good school system, that have job opportunities, rehabilitation and preservation of existing housing that is affordable, but that we need to make sure that there continue to be the quality housing and energy efficient, and that provide that environment where a family can live and be able to be successful. And we have rental assistance payment programs. We are creating opportunities around homeless prevention and eviction prevention. The other thing that we're going to be doing is promoting within the small towns and cities how they can develop affordable housing, how they can talk about affordable housing, how they can create plans for affordable housing.
From my perspective as Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development, when you think about how our economy moves, how our communities move, and what the requisite investments and resources that are required to keep them sustainable and viable. So housing, healthcare, education, workforce development, jobs. Okay, what can we do within our own sphere of influence, within our own work to help move that needle and progress forward? And so one of the areas is just the prioritization of kind of data collection, like really understanding what the state of play is, right? What is happening in our communities? How many businesses do we have? How many businesses of color do we have? We've really been trying to, focus our efforts and really prioritize that data. So when a business actually starts and forms in our state, we can ask them some demographic characteristics, because then in the event that we're standing up resources, right, we can be very intentional and targeted to those businesses.
We will know we have achieved racial equity when race no longer predicts life outcomes. That's the challenge before us, but also the opportunity. People often ask, what can I do? What can I do as an individual? I think firstly and foremost, as individuals, we need to, realize and address that there is an issue. I think secondly, from a fiscal standpoint, one of the greatest solutions I heard recently came from Robert Smith. Robert recommended something called a 2% program, in which corporate citizens earmark 2% of their net income towards reinvesting in communities where there are economic disparities. And before somebody chimes in and goes, this is a charity play. No, what they're saying is do what you're doing, continue to do what you're doing, and turn a profit on what you're doing, but use that 2% to create infrastructure, so that you're removing the existence of these food deserts, so that you're creating affordable housing, educational opportunities for the people who live in these neighborhoods.
We can no longer have our public health services, our safety net hospitals, our federally qualified health centers that utilize their resources for all of the other enabling services, for transportation, for housing, for food, to be left with HRSA giving them grant funding and then scrambling for other funding to try to meet the needs that we know are there. We can't do that. We have to fundamentally change the culture of care. And care is much broader than just our health outcomes. It is the quality of how we live. It is the quality of the food that we eat. It is being able to feel safe. All of our enabling services should be able to funnel through federally qualified health centers, and reimbursement needs to go to the federally qualified health centers. It can no longer just be paid to what we call traditional healthcare any longer. It has to change. If you think about if you're in the reimbursement arena, there is a return on investment, but the broader return on investment is that quality of life of that patient. And that's what we need to be focused on.
I want to say a very special thank you to our panelist members today for all of the information that you gave us today to think about. It's food for thought, things that we probably didn't know, things that we didn't think about before, solutions that we can now talk with our family, our friends, our community as a whole in order to see how we can help to solve the problem.